Everyone, and welcome to the Dark Fanfics. So we are back with an interesting movie on What If Naruto Fall in Love with a Vampire Goddess. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. The system in our world is very simple. The vampires are stronger than the mortals, so they rule. But they must also protect us. If they keep us safe from other vampires, then we give them what they want. And well, they're vampires, so you must already know what they want. I live in Fire Country. There are 6 vampire lords who reign here, along with a body of a few dozen subordinates that regulate over different districts. These vampires are called Hogosha, and ever since I gained the confirmation of his existence, outside of my dreams, I've been obsessed with them. So much so that a few years ago I told my parents that I wanted to become a lawyer so that they would send me to Konoha, where he and all the Hogosha live, so that I could go to this school that mortals and vampires share. While at the school I studied the vampires' history and the system they had built how many thousands of years ago that still protected us now. I learned about the rules that stretch beyond species and power to bind even him. I felt closer to him. But I wasn't alone. Many others desired him too, and it became like a blind race because we were all fighting for a goal we didn't exactly know how to obtain. But I worked hard, and one day there was some hope. You're kidding. Another test. Yeah, Sasuke Dono hasn't had one of those in 5 centuries. My classroom was buzzing that morning. The girls were especially loud, running up and down the halls to other classrooms as they spread the news they had heard, making it was impossible for me to sort out who had voiced it first. But then Sakura came and told me herself. In that duplicitous way she always spoke to me, knowing that I was her only friend and at the same time her most creditable rival. It's true, he announced it last night. I'd heard rumors that he had come out of seclusion and was active again on his search, but you know how it is with Sasuke Dono, there are always rumors. We sat side by side, Sakura doing the homework she hadn't finished. I guess because of all the excitement, you wouldn't have known that she was talking to me if you didn't understand that the two of us don't like to look into the other's eyes. So what type of test then? Is he going to use the Tsukuyomi or? Because when we did we felt the sting of the other's desperate enmity. Sakura cut me off when she laughed. It made my anger spike because she didn't even try to hide the condescendence in it. Don't you know that he always uses Tsukuyomi? It's because it's the most powerful illusion, so he can do whatever he wants and no real physical harm will come to you. Not that Sasuke Dono is being considerate. That technique is known to erode the mind. I know that, I bid, as I turned away from her to watch a group that were in a tense discussion, probably talking about the same thing, the Tsukuyomi. It's a technique that only his bloodline could use, and it's frightening. You scared? She asked with a smirk in her voice, and I turned back to find her still playing disinterested with me. Never. He is mine. Our eyes meet then, only for a moment, but enough to share the oath that burned furiously in the both of us. It was the only thing we had in common, really. The desire was sharp and lethal in both of us, but it didn't matter because I wasn't going to lose to her. He's different from the other 5 vampire lords merely because of the fact that he is still alone. In all of the centuries he's been part of Hogosha, he's never chosen a lover. In fact, for a while now he has been the only lord without one. But what really makes him peculiar, and what causes all the commotion among young mortals, is that he is the only lord that has ever searched for a human lover. I guess it must cause a lot of commotion among the Hogosha too, an Uchiha wanting a mortal lover, but he never seems to care. Every couple of centuries, when he feels like it, he holds his test, and even though they know that it is notorious, that he is supposedly cruel and cold to the effects it leaves on them, or that no one ever passes to the end, they still come. Lined up along the street outside the ivy walls that encircled the Hogosha's private district, hundreds of eager people waited day and night in the cold. The older ones went in first, so as Sakura and I were just 16, we were almost at the end, not that that daunted us. Seeing the losers stumble back home, some even being taken away by ambulance, others just giving up right there in the line, it was like fuel to our resolve. I didn't know what the test was, but I had decided on my own what it might be assessing, and if it was the extent of my love for him he wanted to know, then I wouldn't leave room for doubt. Because I have always loved you. On the 3rd day we finally got inside. We were taken to a building that was supposed to be a meeting hall, and led to a wide room that was darkened by tightly shut windows, dark carpeting and deep red drapes. And he and his brother were there. his obsidian eyes not caring enough to even glide along the row of us properly. We were nothing more than another group. He must have just wanted this to end. I have been around vampires before, especially here in Konoha. They're everywhere, but the Hodosha are different. The potent energy that hovers around them makes your skin prickle and your ears ring until you've adjusted. You feel hot inside, and if you're not careful you'll find yourself moving closer. Like moth to fire, it's an inherent need to touch. Don't come any closer. His voice cut through the silence, though it was no louder than a mutter, and Ino stopped in her tracks. She blinked herself out of the stupor as she wiped at her burning and reddened face with her palms. I'm sorry, she said weakly before she moved back in line with the rest of us. Sakura snickered, but I was enchanted also. I'd never been this close, in the same room, with his attention so near to possibly being mine's. I've only ever seen him on the highest balcony of Konoha's head office with the other Hodosha, making announcements or on the television. This was almost unbearably overwhelming. Do you know what you're here for? Itachi spoke now. His bluntly ominous eyes raised pores and made my palms sweat. We all nodded. You understand the effects of the Tsukuyomi? Yes. If you have any doubts about this test, then leave now. You'll only be even more of a waste of my time. Sasuke spoke now. He was serious, his voice edged with that infamous callousness. I glanced to the side to find them all stiffen, some trying to hold back worried expressions. There were also the few that didn't appear that intimidated. My eyes narrowed at that. Those are the ones that are my true competition. But then he smirked at us like we were all ridiculous, and I felt Sakura shift nervously at my side. Look into my eyes, he told as the two onyx bulbs began to bleed, deep red. I'll take you to hell. Blood-tainted night sky was the canvas upon which hung a crimson full moon which shone down on everything a sanguine light. Stained clouds, and dull stars. And then the shrieking. It gurgled thick and piercing out of the throats of these dog-like beasts that were suddenly attacking us. My eyes widened as the thing, with teeth that were so large it overflowed out of its mouth, ripped a boy apart right next to me. His blood erupted and flew onto me like burning drops of rain, and I could hear each bone as it cracked under every bite. Naruto. Sakura's scream broke the ringing stun that was holding me in place, and just as the boy's still body began to dissolve into a scarlet fog and the beast's interest shifted to me, I ran. Sakura, Sakura. I glimpsed her disappearing behind a corner. We were in some sort of abandoned neighborhood. The ghostly broken shells of houses lied like bleak skulls with their black dimed windows, glowing eyes peeking menacingly through their darkness. There's no way I'm going in there. All I could do was run. So I went after her, whisking past others who either were being eaten or fighting for their lives. I could tell that some were following me because I could hear their fleeting pants, gliding footfalls, and some of them even whimpering. But I could also hear the beasts, so I didn't look back. When I finally got to the end of the street, the same place Sakura disappeared, I continued on and was taken into thick darkness. The sound stopped and all I could hear now was water. It broke apart under our feet and sloshed as we cut a path through the body of it. Where am I? I panted as I tried to discern an image in the formless blackness that was surrounding us. But then it broke, and as if it were some sort of tunnel, we ran through an opening and saw a forest ahead. Ah! I gasped when I looked down and found that we were running on a lake. Not believing it, I closed my eyes and clenched my fists, hoping that the laws of reality wouldn't suddenly decide to return on me as I ran even faster for the bank. Sakura was there. She stood watching me as I bent over trying to catch my breath, her dull eyes looking fretful. I wondered if she regretted helping me, but then I smiled. Even if she did, it's too late. Sasuke and Itachi appeared before the heavy shroud of trees that was the woods. They looked unamused at the shrunken group. I see the Inagami has wiped off a lot of you, Itachi said. Don't be concerned, they are safe, return to reality. They're losers, you all are too, but you're just a bit luckier. Sasuke told us, and then his eyes fell on me, pushing the breath out of my chest and sending a cold shiver down my spine. Especially you. My face colored as I felt crushed. He'd seen when Sakura had called out to me and inadvertently assisted my still being here and not back in the real world with the others. Sakura didn't look at me, but I knew she was satisfied. First test done then, 29 to go. I understand now. It's because we all love him. We all believe that we deserve him. But really, to what extent does love reach? How deep does it run? When will it not be enough? After the third test, the 10th, how about the 17th? When you're in agony, how will your mind blur and your resolve tumble? Many gave up, and with each test it felt like a part of me died and I was shoved closer to the edge where I knew I couldn't go on either. Do I really deserve you? I can't take any more tortures, so does that mean that I'm not worthy of you? The 29th test was a 16-hour scourging. I only survived because I didn't have the energy to even whimper my defeat, and as I laid on the rusted, blood-soaked floor feeling the raw wounds heal themselves gradually in preparation for the next time, I knew that I was done. But it occurred to me that if this was all it took to make me give up all I had worked for, then maybe it wasn't enough to just love him. My cold tears gathered then seeped down my cheeks as I gazed up at the red moon that was as indifferent as his eyes were when he'd watched us be tormented for him. I could hear Sakura's weak crying nearby. She had survived also along with 2 others, but their eyes were just as empty as mine's. This is unexpected, Itachi said from where he sat casually on a large boulder close by. This is the first group that has ever gotten this far. Doesn't matter, Aniki. No one has ever passed the last test. I whimpered. His voice made my insides cringe. After what has felt like weeks right now, I just wanted to get away from him, hardly because of the new associations but also because I have failed him. A new sound filled the area. It was like hundreds of birds, and when I pulled my head to fall to the side I saw that meters away something was lifting itself out of the ground. It looked like a narrow silver paved path, and as it rose it formed a wide circle as it stopped where it began. Look closely. This walk is paved with needles. I did as Sasuke said, and I noticed that he was right. There were millions of small gleaming needles spiked out of the ground so close together that they looked like a solid mass. The last test is to make 10 laps on that path. This person who does this deserves my love. It hurt just looking at it, and the fact that I knew I couldn't do it hurt more than anything else. My eyes stung from my tears when I looked to him. He was so close and I've come so far, but none of you, he asked. And for the first time his tone fell somewhere a bit warmer. His brows tightened as he studied each one, and it almost felt like he was maybe pushing for something, or asking for some type of movement. But then he chuckled bitterly, his head falling slightly as he shook it in a disregarding way. If you never truly loved me, then why did you come? His words was like a blade, the most painful torture throughout this entire ordeal. My tears fogged my sight now as I watched him turn away from us, and I could tell that he was done. So that's it. I thought you didn't care, but you're very disappointed, aren't you? Wait, my voice cracked from my throat. A new stone-hard resolution fell to the pit of my stomach as I struggled to get to my feet. I wasn't certain at all about what I had just decided to do. In fact, this felt as firm as a death wish. But that itself was true, wasn't it? Because I really will die for you. Somehow he managed to look unimpressed as I pulled my tired body, this beaten-down illusion of it, towards the track. My breathing deepened as I prepared myself for the inevitable pain, and could feel my fingertips go numb as if my blood had gone cold and frozen still in their veins. I couldn't even sweat. Pausing at the edge, my bangs shadowed my face as I looked down at the sea of needles, and man did it feel like an ocean, like something huge and impossible. Don't think like that, Naruto. Think only of him. I glanced to the side so that our eyes met, and yes, his attention was on me only and completely. Sasuke was only looking at me. Ha, and he doesn't look that disgusted either. With my first step I felt nothing but the weary air that ran in and out of my chest and the heavy ache in my knees, because God, I was tired. But after that, when the needles began piercing through the same raw places that were only just shredded open before, my screams filled the place. But I shouted to keep myself going insane because I felt like a madman as I desperately realized that I was going through all of this over a feeling, a sharp and consuming one, but just an emotion nonetheless. If ever I doubted my love for him, it was now. At one point, even amidst the inexplicable pain, I almost laughed at how ridiculous I was. Am I stupid then? That was the question that hung in every moment, breaking my steps into parts that made this torture feel not as endless, and when the end came I wasn't there anymore. Consciousness left me and I felt empty. But then I felt him too. It was dim and I wasn't sure what was happening, but I realized suddenly that it was over. Sasuke was holding me and the pain would end now. I won. I'd woken a while now, but my eyes were just so heavy that I took my time opening them, and when I did I realized many peculiar things. First of all, the sleep I'd just roused from felt different. It was like rising out of a deep hole with a boulder on my back and my hands tied, and my limbs really were heavy, almost numb, like I hadn't used them in ages. Also, I wasn't in my dorm at school, though at the moment my body was so limp that all I could see was my hand lying beside my face, the edge of my pillow and the nightstand. This place felt different. After a few more moments I was able to shift my head to the next side. There was a window, most of the fresh light spilled from it, and I could tell it was morning. I grew up in the country outside of Konoha, so it came naturally that I could tell the time of day just by a glimpse of the sun or what outside looked like. They used to tease me about that back at the school, but, as you can see, it comes in handy. Ohayo gozaimasu Naruto-san, I heard an aged voice say, and I tried to sit up to see who it was, but it was difficult. I barely managed to lean up on one elbow. An old lady had entered the room. She was making her way towards the bed I was lying in, which I realized was quite large and lavish looking with its high regal pillars and wispy red drapes. The lady was pushing a cart with a tray of food that I really hoped was for me. Morning. She smiled at me, taking me in for a moment with her lidded eyes. Again I glanced at the tray. I was really hungry. Let me help you sit up, she said, and parked the cart beside the bed before she came to my side and did most of the work getting my body into a comfortable sitting position. Who are you? I asked her as she rested the tray on my lap. I had planned that to be my next task after getting that tray, figuring out what was going on. You can call me Chio. She pulled the covers down to expose my legs, and for the first time I realized that I was wearing some unfamiliar pajamas. Chio sat beside my feet and started messaging them back to life. You must be so stiff after such a long sleep. I paused at her words, the fork full of eggs hanging to a stop in front of my mouth. What? Long sleep? Chio chuckled at my surprise. Naruto-san, you've been asleep for more than 3 days recovering from the Tsukuyomi. Ah, I gasped as I remembered something. Not all of it, just parts. Brief sharp sensations like flashes. I could only remember the pain. Most of it was just a blurred misery, and then the end happened and I felt a warm burning in my stomach. I looked around the place I was in as if for the first time, and I wondered if this was real. Sasuke. I said his name softly and felt a quiet excitement wash over my body with the chill of electricity. This place where I am right now, could it be? Where am I? I asked Chio. You were in Sasuke Dono's chateau, on the Uchiha estate, in the Hogosha grounds. Can you remember what happened, Naruto-san? I nodded my head as I looked off out the window, sort of lost in reverie. It's blurry, but I remember. Chio moved to my next leg. I could feel the life in the one she had just finished with and marveled at those old, feeble-appearing hands. That's good. He was worried that you will forget. He'll be pleased. I looked at her suddenly and asked, where is he? Chio smiled at me as she nodded to the window, and I face-palmed. Right, sorry. I got excited and forgot about the sun. Of course he won't be here. Chio chuckled at me. There is a place under this house, like a dungeon of sorts. That is where he rests during the day. Don't worry. The moment the sun has slipped behind the horizon he will be up here with you, like he has been every night. I felt my face get hot as she said that and knew I was probably blushing. I couldn't help it. The image of him at my side here as I slept, it was besides embarrassing unbelievable. So I really did do it. I got him like I said I would. For a moment I pictured Sakura's face, though I knew my imagination could only go so far. I wished that I could see it with my own eyes as it dawns on her. I chuckled to myself as I continued eating. You're not what I expected, Chio told me, and I realized she was still studying me. Actually, after all these centuries I wasn't sure what to expect Sasuke Dono's lover to be like. I grinned at her as I asked, do I disappoint you? Of course not. I know how impossible the test is. If you are the only person to ever pass it after all this time, then you must be worthy, Naruto-san. Just that. We were all losing hope. We thought that Sasuke Dono would never find you. It was just so strange of him to be searching for a mortal partner. That isn't really done amongst vampires. Chio stood now and went to a closet on the other side of the room. She opened it, started taking clothes out that were probably for me, pants and button-up. They looked my size. At that moment I was wondering exactly how old this woman was. She spoke as if she'd been around here for ages. Chio-ba, I said as I finished my plate. I always wondered why that's so. Why is it so weird that he wanted to choose a mortal? Most vampires are reluctant to choose a mortal as their partner because of what is inevitable. Mortals die, and the only way to prevent that is to convert them. I knew this. Mortals being turned into vampires are something that wasn't really heard of but known to be possible. But the vampires, though they live amongst us, or somehow apart from us, there were things that were just deemed mysteries and the exploration of them out of the question. In other words, the vampires had their secrets and they kept them well. But I guess that I was an exception now, wasn't I? I passed the test. He understands now how deeply I love him, so it was certain, at some point I would become a vampire too. I shivered at the realization, and everything I knew that made a vampire what it was came to mind, and I wasn't so sure how I felt. I didn't think being one would be terribly awful, but there were some things that just weren't encouraging, and I felt a little stupid that after all this time of working hard to get here I never even considered this. Drinking someone else's blood, for instance. I guess it would be as delicious as ramen if I were a vampire, but right now the thought almost made me bring back up my breakfast. Then there was the whole no sun thing. Alabaster skin worked for Sasuke and Itachi, but my tan was like a part of my reputation. This change would be like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Puberty came to mind and I mentally scolded myself. This is serious, Naruto. He is going to want you to change your species. Figure out if you're okay with that. Well, if it was what I had to do to be with him, then there was no doubt I would be a vampire. I will be anything he needed me to be, actually. How is it done? I asked Chio as the question came to me. If I was going through with this, I would need to know. How do I become a vampire? Chio gave me a sturdy look and I could see her struggle with her thoughts before she spoke. Really, Sasuke Dono should be the one sharing this with you, but it is called the Saikaimokyoku, or the washing. It is a long process of conversion, and only if your body survives it will you be a vampire. But how does he do it? You'll know that soon enough. These are things to be considered between you and your new life mate. I'm only a servant, you know. I laughed. Sorry, I didn't know that. I thought you were his grandmother or something. Chio chuckled as she shook her head at me. I'm looking forward to serving you. You're very unlike Sasuke Dono. I wanted to ask her what she meant by that. What was he like? Was he always so cold and intimidating? Chio seemed like she knew a lot and I was about to go into fan mode, but then I remembered that there was no need for that. I'll be figuring out all that myself, as soon as the sun settled. When I was finished eating, Chio took the tray away and left the room for me to change into the new set of clothes in private. I stood for the first time in, apparently, days, and it was a little weird, like I was feeling my weight on my legs for the first time. I didn't know I was that heavy. I walked around the room for exercise, though I really wanted to go outside, but it was a large enough bedroom anyway. Red and black seemed to be the theme here, deep, rich and warm. The colors and the drapes and cushions along with the little antique touches made every bit of the room comfortable, even if it was just to look at. I found myself searching for him in this room, in the ardent colors and the silk-covered island of a bed, for his scent, though I didn't know it. Did he make the room like this himself? Was this his taste? Shit, I don't know anything. I know everything about him, but I actually don't know him, I thought. Then again, the things that I did know about him I was sure everyone else did too. There were books all about Sasuke and this place in Konoha. People like Sakura and me fawned over them like a lifeline and competed over who knew what they thought no one else did. Now I didn't have to do that anymore. Chio stayed close most of the day. I thought that as a servant she might have been busy all day with housework, but she told me that her only job lately was to look after me, so we hung out. She was kind but stern. She'd ask me politely not to walk about too much, for my own sake, as I was still weak from the Tsukuyomi. She sat next to me on the bed, chuckling at my lame jokes and listening patiently to my stories about home. She was the one doing most of the questioning because she said that it wasn't her place to tell me things before he did. Chio warned me that I would be drowsy most of the time, but I still fought against the tug of sleep all through most of the morning and lunch. By afternoon it won though, and I think I'd nodded off while in the middle of describing what my school was like to Chio. All I knew was that when my eyes fluttered open again, as if I suddenly remembered what I was doing before I dozed off, she was gone. I immediately fell back in again though and didn't wake up some hours later. Warm. I pressed closer to the very comforting mass over me. It wasn't the covers, couldn't be. This was solid. I wondered if it were Chio, but as I came closer to being awake I realized how strange that would be, Chio holding me like this. And this person, They smelt different. Chio's scent was a blend of the fresh house and herbs from the kitchen. This person's scent was so appealing to me. It was male and clean. It along with the warmth made my body hot. I opened my eyes but it was night out and so dark that there was no difference between this and my eyelids, like I'd never opened them in the first place. The person over me shifted a bit as if they felt my eyes open, could hear my curious thoughts, and as if telling me to relax I felt their fingertips touch my forehead, slip down onto my closing lids, and I thought that even this is warm. Sasuke, I said softly and felt myself shiver, my body curling against his as if it were being pulled. No answer except his hair against my face. Then his lips were pressed on my eyes still closed, my cheek. He came so close to the edge of my mouth my chest clenched and I moaned softly. He stopped his soundless kisses at my nape. I didn't allow myself to touch him. The idea seemed almost immoral to put my hands up, to move at all, without him saying. And with that thought I felt again that doubt of reality I'd been experiencing all day. I couldn't believe this was happening, that this was him. But I was being stupid. I needed to accept it or else I don't deserve it. I need to see him. Sasuke. I began but halted, even my breath, as I felt his lips brush mine, and I knew this wasn't some thoughtless action but a gentle implication that he understood. And with that the warm hand on my side left and the candles on the tables ignited themselves, causing a deep orange glow to fall onto the room. Sasuke returned my stare, though I admit he probably looked cooler. My mouth was open a little and I was more gawking than staring. His lips pulled up slightly at one end as my silent attempt to swallow my unbelievable reality continued on longer than it probably should. I think I was amusing him. Sasuke came closer to me and kissed the place just before my ear, then my reddened cheek. How are you feeling, Naruto? I closed my eyes at the wash of shudders that erupted just from the sound of my name and wondered how terribly I must be blushing now. I was beginning to hate myself for being so pathetic in front of him. But then Sasuke chuckled. You're cute, love, not pathetic at all. Ah, I startled a little from his words, and because when he said that his eyes for a moment deeped from onyx to red and his usual vampire aura radiated heavy. I realized then for the first time that he was restraining himself. Sasuke was close but he made sure not to press too near. The way his kisses always shied just close to my lips, his hands were trembling. He was holding back. We won't do anything tonight, he explained, or, I don't want to, not yet. I wondered what he meant by anything. Did he mean the Saikaimokyoku that Shinyo spoke of, or stuff that really made my blush deepen? Sasuke chuckled again as he looked down at me and he pressed another kiss near my mouth, both. I tried not to look into his eyes as I spoke. I'm not hurt, just sort of tired. Sasuke touched my face. That's an affect of the Tsukuyomi. Your body should be as normal but your mind is still exhausted. You need to recover a bit longer. So I needed to be in good health before he did converted me. You're anxious about it, Sasuke told me. Chio should not have shared that with you. My eyes widened at that and I began to sit up. No. It's not her fault. I asked about it. Sasuke sat up, also allowing me to sit in front of him, but he pulled me on top of him and held me close by my waist so that I hugged him. I felt like he didn't want to release me, not that I minded. He continued his gentle ministrations on my neck and my face. His light hands running up and down my back were soothing. I continued, Chio is really nice, don't be angry with her. If you take to her, well then I'll make her your servant. He said, and I was a little surprised. Am my servant? Sasuke held my chin and pulled my face up so that my shifting eyes would meet his. His dark eyes that reflected blood in its depths. The crimson color was there again, almost glowing as it grew, and as it did I could feel his hold on me tighten and his want tense the air. I wondered if he knew that I could feel his desire just as well as he could read my thoughts. You're not used to living like this, but Chio will be happy to serve you. It is the devotion of her kind to serve me and my partner. Her kind? She's not mortal. Sasuke shook his head. I knew it. Her kind was created a long time ago. They're human but they age much slowly and are impervious to illness by the help of our blood. Sort of like an incomplete conversion. Oh, I see, I said, though I still didn't complete understand. Sue, if my conversion doesn't go all the way through I'll become like Chio. I thought about my little fears of becoming a vampire. If it were possible to still be immortal and maintain some human features, that would be great. No, Chio's kind came about after centuries of trial and error. of experimenting. They are a phenomenon that cannot be replicated besides through birth. If I don't complete your Saikaimokuyoku, you'll die. I tensed when he said that, and Sasuke looked determined at me. He kissed beside my mouth again. I won't let that happen though. Naruto, you're mine, so you don't have to worry about anything. I chuckled. He sounded so convinced, a little stubborn. It was sort of cute. But I swallowed my little laugh when I saw that he was looking at me sharply. You don't believe me? He asked. And no, I tried to look away from his stare again as my blush came back. I've always wanted this. I've been dreaming of you for as long as I can remember. Even before I knew you, I wanted you, Sasuke. Sasuke's looked surprised by what I said. Me. In your dreams. He smirked. That's very interesting. How is it interesting? Sasuke didn't answer me. He pushed me back down onto my back, then came over me himself between my legs so that we fit perfectly. But the moment my head hit the pillow, I was reminded of how tired I was. It began to tug behind my eyes, but I fought. There was no way I was falling asleep on Sasuke. Sasuke smiled at me, looking amused again, and I wondered if he heard that. You want to know about the Saikaimokuyoku? He stated. The intricate tangles of red almost completely filled his eyes now, and his throbbing intentions were so thick in the room it made my hairs stand in anticipation. I was getting hard. It's long and trying. I will release all my desires on you and engulf you in my blood, gradually corroding your mortality. You will become completely mine and I will become yours. In the end we will be one, without any barriers between our minds and souls. But it will be painful for you. Your mind and body will suffer the entire time. After the pleasure of being held by me, you will face agony. Are you afraid, Naruto? He asked me after a moment, and I back at him seriously. No, I can't wait. I really couldn't, because if at the end of this I'll be with him forever, then suffering for a little while would be just fine. In fact, I find it a pretty cheap cost to an eternity with Sasuke. Sounds like I got the better end of the deal. Sasuke smiled at me. When do we start? It starts with a kiss. And he did. His hot lips touched mine and I lost to the intensity of my want for this, opening my mouth and moaning, begging him to enter. Sasuke took his time licking and tasting my lips first, as if teasing me. But I groaned impatiently and tongued his lips, panting for it. When our mouths parted for just a second, my hips jerked and I tugged him closer in. Finally Sasuke's tongue entered me and he delved deep, lapping in all of me and savoring my taste. I couldn't breathe and the pressure of was getting heavy in my chest, but I didn't want him to stop. Even if it hurt, I wouldn't let him stop. I pushed my tongue up to explore him too and take control of the kiss for a moment, and by accident I felt it. My tongue brush against the edgy tip of it and I jumped and pulled back. Sasuke let me take a breath as he watched me intensely, our foreheads still together, but then he stuck the end of his tongue out and I saw that same fang I'd just teased be grazed quickly by his tongue. Not a lot of blood came out. It was barely enough for me to distinguish the dot of red from his pink tongue, but then Sasuke held my chin and pulled my mouth open and I heard him in my head. Just a taste. I got a television set. Chio rolled it into the room on a stroller and left it at the front of the bed and gave me the remote. She must have noticed the look on my face when I asked her what options for entertainment they had in this place, and she started talking about Sasuke's personal library. Not that I have anything personal against reading, I just personally don't see why it should be done when I wasn't even at school. Sasuke choosing a partner was all over the news. Even other countries were interested in it and in me. I saw my parents on TV a couple of times talking about how much I had wanted this and so on. Chio allowed me to call them and let them know that I was doing okay. I explained that I was bedridden because of the test and hadn't been outside in days. My mom wanted to know when they would get to meet Sasuke, or their son-in-law, as she flippantly put it. But I also wondered that. I was his now. I felt like that and I loved it, but was I never going to get out of this house? I know I could be overthinking it. It had merely been less than a week and Chio was only strict with the bed rest because she was worried about me, but what was going to happen after I recovered to their liking? Did Sasuke mean to lock me away or something? Would I mind being locked away by Sasuke? I hadn't seen him in 2 nights, not since our first meeting. Chio explained that he was busy with usual Hogosha concerns. Sasuke's duty was to the borders of Fire Country. He made sure that they were always strong and protected, that there was a regulation of who went in and out, and also it is his job to know who our threats are. I learned all this when I started researching him years ago, so now as I reasoned with it, it made sense why he'd be too busy to see me. Or at least I tried to reason with it, but I soon gave up and concluded that I missed him and didn't care what his responsibilities were, that the safety of the entire country will be threatened without him. I just wanted to see him. Ever since that kiss, the thought of Sasuke was always there, like a pleasant redundant beat in my mind. I couldn't forget him. And this wasn't my usual love-sick doting. This was compulsive and driven, and it started with that kiss. When I closed my eyes and relived that moment, I could taste it almost perfectly. That hot, sweet sanguine kiss that burned blindly through my limbs and made every muscle in my body tense. Sparked each nerve in climatic waves that started at my tongue and instantly absorbed me entirely. I couldn't remember much after Sasuke let me taste him because I had passed out or fallen asleep. Either way, it was all dark after that moment, and the next thing I knew I woke up. The sun was out and Chio was bringing me lunch. From then onwards, that minuscule bit of his blood has been haunting me. I can't count how many times I'd relived, went over and obsessed over every detail of what happened 2 nights ago. I wondered if this was what Sasuke talked about. Was this a taste of the Saikaimokuyoku? Was this the suffering he warned me of? If it was, then honestly it wasn't much different from how I was usually fixated on him. It was like a hyped obsession. I could deal with this. This Saikaimokuyoku should be easy. Today was really slow. Nothing was on television, though Sasuke didn't have cable, so the TV actually got dull a long time ago, and my mind kept sending me in circles with its tiring urges. If I were home or back at the academy, I would have gone out for walk or run. I would have found an escape from myself outside. I looked out my window from where I was still in bed. It was probably around 6 in the afternoon, but darker because of some gentle but steady rain. The thought of the approaching night empty of Sasuke made my chest clench. I felt frustrated with my forced immobility, but mostly with his absence. I kicked off the covers that Chio had tucked around me when the rain started 2 hours ago to keep me warm. I hadn't seen her since then actually, and thought that she was probably getting my dinner ready like she usually did around this time. My legs touched the ground and I put my weight on them, expecting to feel the burden of my weight like the last time, but it felt pretty normal to me as I walked to the door. I opened it just a crack, wide enough to peek into the hallway outside. Bronze and alabaster light fixtures lit up the way along the stone walls. Windowless, it felt dark, lonely and still, and I suddenly wondered what the other servants were like, if there were any at all. I walked down the hallway, passing other rooms, until I came to the end of that floor and a wide bronze staircase with black wrought iron balusters that curved and flowed into a foyer. It was so quiet I could hear my footfalls accompanied by the hum of the rain. Where the heck is everybody? I muttered to myself as I stood in the middle of the circular room trying to figure out in what direction to explore next. There was a doorway before and behind me. I walked closer to the one ahead and leaned against the frame as I studied what looked like a music room. There was a jet black grand piano and cello. Taking a look around, I jumped and spun around wide-eyed and ready to fight or run for my life. Jesus Christ! I gasped as I held my heart and tried to call my soul back. The man smiled at me. It was sleek and snake-like though, almost a smirk, as if he was enjoying this. I'm afraid not, but I am Kabuto though. He told me, and I watched the bespectacled man bow low. Why, you're a servant? Yes, I serve Sasuke Dono. Are you okay, Naruto-san? I shook my head. You scared the shit out of me. Kabuto rose an eyebrow at me and I realized that I had forgotten my manners, though his condescending expression didn't make me regret it. I apologize if I startled you, but what is Naruto-san doing out of his room? Kabuto smiled again, that teasing one from before, and it made me feel a little childish. I stood up straight so that I could match his height and seem more serious. I thought I'd stretch my legs a bit, can't stay in there all the time. Kabuto's smile went to his eyes now, but his tone remained the same, defying Sasuke Dono's orders. But I guess you can get away with it as you are his partner. I looked into the other man's eyes for a moment before I answered, trying to gauge what he was really trying to say. For some reason I didn't get this guy. He wasn't like Chio at all. I shrugged, I guess. Kabuto led me to what he called a drawing room, but it was just another lavish room with large sofas, deep lighting and a fireplace. Nothing contemporary, not even a radio. This place is old, Kabuto said, and I nearly jumped again. Are you a vam? No, I'm just a servant like I said, but I do have certain gifts. Sasuke Dono has told you of our kind. Yeah, he spoke about you. I recalled the brief history of Chiyo's kind from a few days ago. Though we're not vampires, sometimes the most pure-blooded of us can be born with one or two vampire traits. Kabuto told me with his head high, and I almost snorted. He glanced at me suddenly, probably hearing that thought, and I turned away suddenly, very interested in the cushion beside me. Well, Sasuke should update this place a bit. I began, trying to change the topic. It has a lot of potential, like this room would make a great private cinema. Kabuto didn't appear interested. I wondered if he knew what a cinema was. I know what it is. If you think it's so necessary, then you can bring it up with your partner. It's one of the obligations of a partner to keep the other informed with the current world. I see that with you Sasuke Dono will become versed in the more frivolous aspects. Frivolous? I wanted to counter that, but something else caught my interest. By the way, how are you feeling, Naruto-san? Kabuto asked me before I could act on it. I shrugged. Okay, I guess. Still a little tired. And your dreams? Do you still dream of the events of the Tsukuyomi? I thought about my recent dreams, which were all of Sasuke, and blushed as I shook my head. Kabuto smiled again. He's already begun, he said softly, and when I turned to him he stood and came closer to me. My specialty is medicine. I'll check how you're doing physically. He told me before he sat down beside me and went straight for eyes. He was checking my pupils. Hey Kabuto, what do you mean by my obligations? I asked finally, what I had been pondering since he mentioned it. Do you know why it's important for a Hogosha to acquire a partner, Naruto-san? He asked me, and I shook my head as the man checked my pulse. The practice began in the beginning when the Hogosha first came together, when the countries were overtaken with evil vampires and there were many wars. Hogoshas are more powerful than the average vampire, but even they had their limits, and when a vampire is out of blood they turn to ash. It's just as efficient as sunlight in killing a vampire. But when a vampire shares their blood with their mate, they become one. Therefore a partner is probably the most powerful resource for a vampire. They are like a body full of their own potent essence, and as Hogosha often risk their life fighting for their country, the extra blood is very important. Do you understand, Naruto-san? Kabuto asked me as he looked into my eyes, a strange glint in his bespectacled reflection. You are a very useful object to Sasuke Dono. With you he will now become twice as strong. All you have to do is try not to trouble him, and be there when he needs your blood. Kabuto didn't need to continue. I understood what he was saying, and I know he felt it sting me, the falter in my eyes and in my mind. Am I really just an object? I felt a sudden tug on my mind and body, then. It was like a silent, wordless calling of attention that stilled the room, and both Kabuto and I turned in the direction it came from. My stomach was already fluttering before my eyes even connected with his, and when they did meet those relentless dark pools, I felt an inexplicable heat under my skin, tingling at my fingertips. Like a pleasant electricity in the air, that was his aura to me, a pleasurable sting. His eyes swept from me to the other man sitting next to me holding my hand, and I felt Kabuto's fingers, which were pressed under my wrist, loosen. He hesitated for a moment as if surprised, but he quickly recovered and stood to bow. As Sasuke approached us, Kabuto stepped away from me, leaving space for him to come between us. I caught onto the uncomfortable air and realized that it was coming from Sasuke. Was he angry? I'm sorry, I was only checking up on Naruto-san's health. Kabuto explained, probably in answer to a mental question from Sasuke. Sasuke didn't seem pleased. His back was all I could see, but I could feel the air prickle under his presence, and I shrunk a bit in my seat. There's no need for you to do that. I thought I made it clear to everyone that I only wanted Chiyo handling Naruto. He told the other calmly, without bite or heated emotion, but still managing to shake Kabuto up a bit. The servant shifted, his eyes never raising high enough to catch Sasuke's knee. I apologize. Naruto-san left his room. I was planning to escort him back. I'm sorry. Sasuke watched him for a moment longer, then said in a softer voice, I don't want you touching him. No one actually. Chiyo is the only one I tolerate right now, but let the other servants know that I don't want them near him. He paused and my eyes narrowed as I tensely watched the back of his head. It seemed like Sasuke was actually struggling with what he was about to say. I don't know what I might do. I won't hold back, so no one is to touch him. Understand? Yes, my lord. Kabuto bowed again. Sasuke turned with nothing more to say. He took my hand into his warm clasp and I stood without him even having to pull. I heard him in my mind with comforting, almost apologetic words. He took me back up to the room silently. In there the energy around him changed. It dissolved, peeling away its chill and wrapping around me like it did that first night. He took me up to the bed and I crawled back in and watched him take his coat off. The frustration and anxiety I felt before was gone. I couldn't even remember what I was so pissed about. I was so drunk off of him now and he hadn't even really touched me yet. Sasuke, I moaned from where I lied waiting for him. Too long. He smirked at me and I was told to be patient as he rested his coat down. He only wore some fitted dark pants and a black, loose shirt that wasn't buttoned all the way up. The cuffs of the long sleeves was also loosened. I wondered what he would look like without anything on. I almost moaned as I imagined that smooth, faultless skin and I got hard when I imagined it against my own naked flesh. I knew that he could probably be hearing every unspoken word in my mind right now, but it didn't bother me, unlike it did with Kabuto, because my mind wasn't the only place I wanted Sasuke in and I hoped that was very clear to him. He crawled over me, straddled my waist and brought his mouth down to place those hot kisses on my neck like burns and I held my breath. You want me inside you? He asked before he licked my ear and I hissed. Already he had me panting and I wanted to attack him, grab onto him, turn him over and rip his clothes off myself, but like before I couldn't move. I just nodded my head. Chan, don't let anyone else touch you, Naruto. You're mine inside and out. He kissed me deeply and bucked when our tongues met, my desperate hips searching for his friction, but I felt his stern hand on my waist pinning me down to the mattress. Sasuke's fingers slipped beneath the band of my pants to explore flesh that he had never caressed before. He swallowed my moans as he pulled my pants off along with my underwear, exposing my bottom half and instantly finding his place between my legs. Sasuke's mouth moved to my nape where he placed gentle kisses, but I gasped when I felt the sharp sting of a fang on my neck. He didn't bite me. I realized with surprising disappointment he'd only grazed it along my skin and I felt the burn of slithers of red marks he'd left. It shocked me how sharp they were, the sweet bits of metal sliding dangerously close to my vitals. From just a taste of them I knew how easily they could make damage, not even like blades but like fire. They can slice through my skin and I wanted them to. So badly I wanted him to drink from me. Sasuke, please. I panted with my eyes closed and soon it turned into a chant that even my mind resounded. I held him close with my bare knees and with my arms around his neck. Please. I felt his fingers suddenly against my opening. They circled the tight muscles, sending waves of shudders through body before he began pushing in and out. Ah, sass nh. He licked the marks on my neck, making them sting stiffly, but also finally pushed through the tightness of my ring of muscles and fully entering me. It was just his finger, but I almost came bucking and crying out. Sasuke moved his other hand between us and clasped my swollen member and started pumping, making me see lights behind my eyelids. It didn't take much, probably 5 strokes before I came with his mouth on my mouth, sliding my tongue against his fangs and enjoying the feel of them cutting into me, the bitterness of my blood mingling between our mouths, blending with his hotter blood. Sasuke's eyes seemed to fill with it, like a labyrinth of blood tangled in depths of darkness, and he lapped hungrily into my mouth, drinking me, sucking the small slit on my tongue, taking everything from me. I dreamt that I was sitting in bed, as usual, the covers pulled over my legs, a small pile of pillows behind my back. Comfortable, like only Chiyoba can make it. I was sitting up like I always did when I was watching the television, but it wasn't on. Also, I was very alone. I'm mostly alone when Chiyo and Sasuke are not there, but this was a chilling emptiness, enclosing like spikes against my skin and shrinking into me like a serpent. I felt it in the room. It was more of a realization than the actual introduction of a new presence. It was like it was always there and, staying as tensely still as someone who knew they were being stalked, my eyes surveyed the room, sliding cautiously from one end to the next, acting sure the shadows didn't move, that the corners didn't creep in. Finding nothing did not make me feel any better, and when a new realization hit me, I felt the fear trickle through me like tiny spiders with needle-like legs scuttling up my skin. I looked down at my hands that lied still on my lap, pressed into the plush duvet. I raised them slowly and released a shallow breath as I griped the edge of them. I could smell it, like dank, rusted blood, a metallic rawness that wafted as pungently as a wet dog. Its fusty panting became loud in my ears, deep and shallow. With each exhale, the fiery breath curled up my legs and clung to my body as if it wanted to entangle me. I realized I had paused, taking this fleeting second to reconsider, because this was for sure a dream, so I didn't need to put myself through this. I don't have to see the beast that had its burning claws and spiky fur wrapped around my feet. I could wake myself up, but his hold tightened, like the convulsing muscles of a snake flattening out against me and tugging me closer into itself. He pulled higher up like he was devouring me. I want more. A sickeningly guttural voice bubbled up to me from under there. We want more. Want more what? I thought, but then the bed shuddered, creaking like it never had before. I stilled when I saw that blood was seeping out from under me. It stained the white sheets and sapped in further until it was like a thick red halo all around me, and I was panicking at the possibility that it was mine. I couldn't wait anymore. Convincing myself that this was a dream was starting to become difficult, and it was very clear that this was a terrible nightmare. I just lifted the duvet in one swooping go. Sasuke came the next night also, his presence falling in with the night, and we shared that kiss again, that exchanging of blood which mostly contained mine's and just a taste of his. I had to arouse a second kiss out of him. Took me an entire hour of seducing something I thought I didn't know a thing about until I had Sasuke's body beside me and that unyielding craving for more of him ravishing my mind. I told him about the freaky dream while I was having a really late dinner. Sasuke let me have it in a veranda on one of the higher floors. We sat together at the table, Sasuke beside me without a plate, of course. He told me that he could still eat if wanted to though, but food was not nourishing to him, and as he hadn't eaten in centuries it might feel a little weird. I laughed. Vampires can get an upset stomach. If you're not careful you'll get one too. He implied about my third helping. I grinned. Shioba's cooking is almost as good as my mom's, and I only add the almost because if I didn't I wouldn't be allowed back home. The moonlight did to Sasuke's features what the sunlight often did to mine's. It seemed to enhance him. His pale skin glowed smoothly. The red that I thought were hidden in his eyes actually shimmered through the black constantly, and when he was excited it swelled. Sasuke's arm was rested on the back of my chair and he ran his fingers through my hair as we spoke. When he realized I was staring he smirked as he leaned in and pressed a kiss at the side of my mouth. So, you wanted to know how to block me out of your mind? He said, reminding me of what I had said earlier, about Kabuto getting into my head. I never said that. I just didn't like when that Kabuto guy did it. Sasuke tried to look indifferent, but I knew he liked the implications of what I had just said because his magnetic energy started tugging me and tickling my skin. We were outside. There was only the table and the floor, so I blushed at the uncontrollable images of Sasuke taking me right here. Do you want me to? I felt him breath into my ear and I shivered and angled away from him slightly. Maybe I should block you out too. I muttered in my embarrassment, and Sasuke looked a little upset. I'm just saying, some thoughts are private. I like knowing about all the naughty things you want me to do to you. Especially those thoughts. Sasuke chuckled. I felt the small smile of his lips when he pressed them against my neck. Then his mouth opened and his fangs grazed a stinging path down. I gasped and he stopped, then licked the reddening lines. Sasuke's desire wafted around me again, swelling like a powerful tide, then trembling back into his control again, leaving my ears ringing. He's starting to get impatient. As a mortal you can't block a stronger mind out. It will take years of practice. You would have eventually gained that strength as you're turned. Ever since you started drinking my blood you've already become a little stronger. I don't feel stronger. Don't worry, it's happening. I wanted to introduce the Saikaimokuyoku slowly to you, but, he paused and released a shaky sigh. I felt his thrumming desire in air again for just a transient moment. I can't hold back anymore. I faced him, to look into his reddening eyes, and Sasuke kissed me, and if you want to learn how to block me out then rolling on with it would be best. I never said I wanted you out. I pleaded against his lips, though I thought it was sort of cute that he was sulking. I wondered what Sasuke would look like pouting, and got a gentle but startlingly sharp nibble on my top lip as a response to that thought. Sorry. Why were you going slowly with the Saikaimokuyoku? I asked him. The washing is like an exchange of blood. I trade your blood with mine's, and if your body and mind can handle it, then you'll be a vampire. If I made the exchange suddenly in one go, it would be agonizing and you'll probably never survive. So you were taking it easy on me. Sasuke smirked. Was I underestimating you? Yes. Give me all you've got, Sasuke. I can take it. Sasuke chuckled again, similar to an adult at the face of a child's enthusiasm. I doubt that, and I'm not going to risk your life even if you can handle it. I've been searching for you a long time. I will not lose you to the Saikaimokuyoku. The resolution in his eyes made my chest clench warmly. It was almost intimidating. I saw why he was notorious among all the Hogosha for getting what he wants. He studied me for a while, but I had nothing else to say. If he wanted to hurry the progress along or not, it was his say, though I still knew I could take it. Without another word, he picked up a clean carving knife from the spread on the table and brought it to Tohi's throat. My eyes followed the slitting closely. My mind zoned in on it and seemed to take up a foreboding still, and my senses perked at the smell, the sight of the crimson on white, with the intensity of a stalking animal. It amazed me how little control I had over these, at the moment, harmless reactions, and recalled what Sasuke said about those changes that I thought I hadn't noticed yet. He didn't need to tell me to drink. I held onto his shoulder the instant he put the knife back down and licked the thin trail that had slid down until I came to the opening and covered it with my mouth. I can't believe I thought drinking blood would be disgusting. It's as indescribable as an orgasm. Yuto-san. A voice bubbled through the wall-like haze of a terrible dream, and I whimpered, Naruto-san. Naruto-san. I opened my eyes to Chiyo's face that looked almost unkind from the serious concern that burdened it. She was looking down at me like she expected a conniption from me or something, but it was probably justified because I was panting and sweating like I had just ran a few miles. Adrenaline was fueling a steadily high pulse in my temples, and my throat was sore from screams that still rung in the room. Chiyo released my shoulders, which I hadn't realized she was holding, quite tightly, before. Are you okay? She asked me with a soft but heavy voice. I swallowed. The sweat that was beginning to soak through my clothes was making me feel a little chilly. I'm fine. It was just a bad dream. Chiyo nodded slowly, still studying me. It's the third time since yesterday. She was right. I woke up in a similar state yesterday morning too, and when I took a nap later that day. But I didn't know what to tell her. Normally people have nightmares for a reason which Chiyo was implying right now, but mine's didn't have any I could think of. Yeah, they're sort of annoying. I tried to present a grin for her. It came, but it was pretty forced. Maybe I shouldn't watch those X-Files reruns anymore. I chuckled and Chiyo frowned, but then sighed after, like she was letting the subject drop, or at least allowing me to change it. Okay. She shook her head as she sat up. Would you like a bath? Yeah, I think I'd like that. She went to the closet, getting out my towel, and I pulled the covers off so that I could take it and then head for the bathroom. My mind was still active with the remaining whispers of the dream, the least relevant parts already dissolving from memory, leaving me the foggy remains of panic and flashing images of blood. And its eyes. I tried to wash off the weary feeling with a hot bath, but it went nowhere. Since I last drank from Sasuke, I had been feeling very different. I ran a fever most of the time and everything hurt me. From my footfalls to the gentle press of my bed covers, it was like I was suddenly super sensitive. Even the drops that fell through the shower felt like bullets against my skin. I hissed and took it off quickly, then switched to the tub. This sensitivity and fever only dulled when night fell. It went away completely when Sasuke came close. His touch was the complete opposite actually. I think my body was heightening itself to favoring it, because when he was around everything went right again. When he wasn't, my mind was dazed in lamenting over missing him. Heavy-eyed and drunk with impalpable pain, my thoughts ran circles around me, all about him, until I couldn't keep track of time anymore and I was left just staring off for hours. This is what happened this morning as I sat in the tub, the water becoming blandly cold. My head leant back over the edge as I silently relived the parts of the dream I remembered. At some point Chiyo knocked on the door and asked if I was all right. I knew she was making sure I hadn't drowned or something. I'm okay. Sorry, I'm coming out now, I said back at the closed door and sighed as I took up a handful of water and masked it over my face to wake myself up, then pulled the rest through my hair. I felt bad. I must be worrying Chio with the way I was behaving, but I refused to admit that this had anything to do with the Saikaimokyoku. It was just too subtle, too much forged within myself. I don't know, I guess I expected the things Sasuke warned me about, this convergence, to come directly from somewhere I could name, point at and fight back at with everything I had, but this that I was going through made me feel like I was being consumed by something from inside. I got up out of the tub carefully, wincing when my feet touched the floor, and I felt like the little mermaid with the blades cutting into them. I wondered if I should tell Sasuke about this, but that would just make him worried. Yeah, I realized recently that the vampire wasn't just admiring me when he stared, which was what I do when I stared at him. He actually studies me like a hawk and gets anxious about anything perceivably abnormal. If I told him about how sick I was when he wasn't there, he might hold back on the Saikaimokyoku. It frustrated me how little blood of his blood he would give me, like he didn't believe in me at all. He would always pull me away too soon, and when he did, the compulsions I felt, the jerking aggression that flared out of me, like wild reaching arms, clawed and desperate, it frightened me. But I just wanted more. Chio left the room to allow me a chance to dress, then I sat in bed and waited for her to bring my breakfast. I didn't feel up to eating outside in the veranda today. The sun made my eyes burn. Another thing I should question Sasuke about. He told me only the older vampires can't abide the sun. When she returned, she placed the platter on my lap and I thanked her. As usual, it looked good, a traditional breakfast. Rice, miso soup with tofu and green onions, nori, grilled salmon, and tamagoyaki with tsukemono. Truthfully, the sight of the food made my stomach reel and my mind recoiled like an animal from the surge of frustration I felt, similar to what I'd feel when I was stopped drinking by Sasuke, and I couldn't understand why. Disgusting. It's not. It's food. It's disgusting. Don't you want more? Tell the stupid old bitch to get you some. Shut up, Naruto-san. Chio was staring at me, at my hands that were clamped around my ears, fork still between my fingers, my grimaced face. I unclenched my eyes and looked back at her as I released a shaky sigh. Sorry, I muttered an apology. I couldn't believe I said that. It was in my head, but I still thought it anyways about Chio. And it hurt too, like something sharply rough, callously clenching around my head in anger. It physically and mentally hurt. Are you okay? Yeah, the miso was just a little hot. My eyes were watering. Chio went back to putting fresh clothes in my dresser and I wiped them dry with my arm, then went back to trying to convince myself to eat, but the only thing that I could bring myself to feign appeal for was the soup. We don't want that. I ignored the thought, even ignored how it didn't seem to stem from me but whisked up as an invention of its own. Because that would be a frightening thing, uncontrollable thoughts. I swallowed the warm food and something coiled and thrashed in me like an animal in pain. Like ash. It tastes like ash. Spit that putrid shit out. I felt then as if my throat had closed up. I held it as I coughed the spoonful of soup into my other hand. Bent over the plate, I used a napkin to cover my coughs and held the free hand up at Chio to show I was okay when she glanced up at me again. I decided I wasn't hungry. That night Sasuke came and went quickly, appearing like a sleek dark spirit through the window, floating through the welcome darkness of my bedroom and sharing a swift sanguine kiss with me, easing all the pains and aches, pushing any doubts or worries I had during the day to the corners of non-existence and absorbing me in lusty red world that we created between us every night. But like I said, it was brief. Soon his hot lips pulled away from me. Sorry, love, no more. And the gloriously ringing high that was so intense weeks ago was gone in seconds, replaced by that thrashing, angry yearning, that coiling snake, the hot angry beast-like thing that muttered silently one word. But Sasuke didn't hear it. He was gone already, a meeting or something like that, and I spent the rest of the night in bleak dreams. Today I couldn't eat much either. Something in me just wouldn't let me do it in peace. It was really becoming frustrating, and I seemed to feel that way about everyone, even Sasuke. He knows I want more. I mean, I make it pretty obvious every night when I beg for him not to pull away, but he does anyway. I decided that I needed to get out of that bedroom because I was feeling much better now, besides the acute sensitivity, and there was no way in hell I was spending another day watching rerun soaps. I was beginning to like them. That's really frightening. Shio told me that I could go outside, but Sasuke wouldn't want me leaving the grounds, which I knew already without either of them saying. But I had no intentions of partying, I just wanted to get outside. Today was perfect for that. Wet and overcast, gray, burly rain clouds blocked out the sun so that it looked like mid-evening, and it would be like this all day too. I could smell it. When I stepped outside, I spent at least a half an hour experiencing the new atmosphere. The clumpy wet air perfumed lightly with grass and earth. The wind heavy with the musty scent of the forest that was a few miles away. I could smell some animals, 2 horses. I didn't notice what I was doing until I was in a field, half a mile away from the chateau, with my bare feet in the moist earth and my eyes closed as I tried to listen to the gentle raindrops against the surface of a lake that I couldn't even see. What the fuck? I muttered. I opened my eyes and shivered, though I wasn't at all cold. Another surprising thing given that all I was wearing were jeans and a thin t-shirt in this weather. I sensed something else behind me, a pack of 4 dogs. They had been discreetly following me since I stepped outside, and they were becoming bold now that I was still. I tried to remain calm so that they would too. I lean RT enough from my dad, who worked a lot with animals, to know that dogs mostly mirror your own energy. Also, something told me that that would be the right thing to do. Soon enough they were gathered casually around me. One even allowed me to pat its head, and I remembered Shio mentioning that one of the security measures of the Uchiha grounds were dogs, Norwegian elkhounds I think they were. Do you smell that? I released a shaky sigh as the thought gripped me just as suddenly as the new rusty scent that wafted weakly up my nose. I shook my head as if I was trying to get something out. In the forest, in the forest, in the forest. The chant went on and on until I was left clutching my head, and the dogs were alert on me again, probably wondering if I was mad and if they should rip me apart for it. Okay, I whimpered. It was becoming painful, an impalpable hurt that reverberated through every part of me. Okay. I took off, ignoring the daggers under my feet and the sting of the wind against my reddening skin, in the direction of the forest, a looming canopy of green made even darker due to the rain. The dogs followed behind me, growling and barking, kicking up a loud noise of excitement. When I ran faster, their ruckus seemed to wane, and when I looked behind I saw that it was because they couldn't keep up with me. I might have stopped just from the shock of that. I definitely couldn't run that fast a few weeks ago. But the chant compelled me on until the scent became heavier and I came upon a lump on the ground. It was a horse. Its shallow breathing came slowly, and its wide glossy eyes held a diming silent panic that I could hear like shrieking in my ears, louder than the fading cant, louder than my own rationality, because all it seemed I could focus on was the disgusting gashes in its thigh and at the bottom of its neck. Wood, it looked like, probably from a fence that it had jumped. Maybe it was scared and tried to jump over it. It was young horse, they tend to do that. But the blood was like a swollen fog engulfing the entire area in a red viscous stink, a bubble dome of noise in my head that screamed for me to drink. Yes, drink it now. But it's not even dead. Who gives a shit? We want it. We want more. Shut up. That's disgusting. The dogs were barking at my back, whimpering and shuffling through the dead leaves and mud. Somehow I know they are afraid of me. Right now I'm afraid of me too, of the clawing in my head and me shouting at myself as I near the still horse, kneel down beside and spread my hands through its blood-soaked fur. With wide eyes muttering cursed at it, I plunge my hands into the wound and they melt into the red-hot, twitching muscles, the blood seeping endless out and over its neck into the mud and rain. I pulled my hands out and felt the heat flow down to my elbows, my arms and shoulders, and scorching a raw path down my throat. Good, so good. I jumped out of a nightmare and found myself sweating in bed. It was a creepy dream. It was chasing me through the halls of Sasuke's chateau. It squeezed its large blood-red mass through the narrow corridors after me with a voracious desperation that scared the shit out of me. It was so real. My heartbeat throbbed in my chest and reverberated all the up to my temples. I had to calm down. I wiped the sweat off my face with my shaky hands, then paused when I noticed something. I felt okay. Well, besides the shrieking panic still fresh around me, I felt no pain, no burning red eyes, pins on my skin, or those never-ending pangs of hunger. I felt like Sasuke. I could feel him in the house, downstairs inside the morning room, and I closed my eyes as I tried to feel him. Sasuke stinging, electrified energy, without touching him. Grope through the meaningless, bendable space that I knew I could make not matter to me, and see the image that I knew was there, that was gradually emerging. Yes, he was with Chio. She sat at an elegant, pale marble table. There was water can rested beside her. She was probably just watering the plants in the morning room a moment ago. I could hear them talking. Actually, I wouldn't call it hearing, just knew what they saying. He came back covered in blood and mud, Chio said gravely. Her shaky voice echoed hollowly in the silent room, rambling about something in the forest. It took a while to calm him down. In the end I had to give him medicine to get him asleep. It worried me very much, the entire thing. He's been behaving strangely. Sasuke didn't answer at first, but I could have felt him opposite her, his body making a slender silhouette in the dark room. You think this is the Saikaimoku? He finally stated. I'm not sure, my lord. It could be, but I've never seen. Chio's words halted when Sasuke lifted his hand, signaling her to stop. And then I understood that he knew that I could hear them. I could feel the tug of his mind, the feeling of being held away without being touched, as if he had taken my hand and gently pulled me out of the room. The image was now gone. I pouted at being thrown out, but looked up when I heard the door of my bedroom softly close and Sasuke stood in front of it. His dark knee-length jacket was unbuttoned and it exposed a wind-ruffled shirt. I could smell weak wisps of the city on him. There was no red in his eyes. They were two onyx rocks, a cold darkness that gleamed its own light amongst the shadows he stood in. I chuckled nervously because he hadn't said a word or moved yet. Something told me he didn't really know what to say. I ruffled my hair nervously. It wasn't as bad as Chiyoba made it sound. It scared the hell out of my dogs. Huh, think they'll ever talk to me again? He smiled. Well, he smiled enough for Sasuke, which wasn't very much but enough for me. Why are you so far away? I put my hands out. I wanted him in bed with me. I wanted my kiss even though I knew the frustration will haunt me. You don't come much lately, so when you're here we shouldn't have any space between us. I intentionally made it sound like a command which seemed to amuse Sasuke. He rose one of his sharp eyebrows challengingly. Some problems are arising in Konoha and unfortunately I'm required. He told me as he took his jacket off and approached the bed. I pulled the covers away so that he could slip in beside me. What kind of problems? You don't have to worry about that. Sasuke held onto me and I was enveloped in his natural scent blended with the stale city, fresh wind and something much richer when he opened his mouth to speak, then to press kisses on my neck. It was blood. I understood after a while that the reason Sasuke felt so warm when he touched me was because he fed himself before seeing me every night. I told him that he could have toad skin and I'd still be all over him, but I guess it's a self-conscious vampire thing. But his feed, probably from moments ago, wafted a lusty, dank aroma that made every muscle in my body clench, spurred frantic memories connected to that scent and kindled the ghost of the taste of blood in my mouth. I imagined it instantly filling my mouth, scorching my throat and burning from the inside, like it did with the horse. But much better. Yes, much, much better than that revolting animal. The thought came as a flicker of pain and I cringed, but Sasuke didn't notice. He was talking about something else. The heat of his voice licked my ear and poured more of that scent around me, and for the briefest moments I wondered if he can hear me. Though right now my thoughts seemed to be possessed by one steady mission, couldn't he hear the chanting that screamed as loud as lights in my head? Couldn't he at least hear the faint crying for help somewhere behind the noise? The solitude was crushing. The realization startled me and I felt myself shrinking in an indescribable way, though it was similar to how powerless I felt in forest with the horse, right before the decision was made beyond me to drink from it. The moment before the moment when it took over and my feet fell free of the ledge. Sasuke kissed me and I felt it move, greedy and grasping like it did after me when I was running from it in the dream, but now I was the narrow corridor that was choking it in. Creaking and straining, cracking at the edges and bursting at the weak spots as its blood-red mass carelessly shoved on. Before I could stop myself I held onto Sasuke's head, wrapping both arms from behind roughly and pulled him close with a strength that I didn't know I had. I opened my mouth and bit down without care for where, his tongue or lips, as long as it bled it didn't matter. Sasuke grunted when I bit him and I felt him try to pull away, but he couldn't even move because of my grip around his head. I heard my name rumbled through his mouth and into mine. It sounded patient but commanding and I tried to regain control of myself, to rationalize, but it had begun and I knew this wouldn't end until it was satisfied or was stopped by force. My fingers dug into the back of Sasuke's head and neck like claws, and his blood seeped out as a ring between our tightly clashed mouths while I drank like my life depended on it. I knew I was hurting him. I could feel him trying to push me off, and I felt his mouth called out to me to stop. I also knew he was being gentle and that he could tug me off of him easily if he chose, but no, Sasuke, he was probably more afraid of hurting me. Inevitably the blood took me over and I become intoxicated with it, and like a calming animal its chokehold on me eased and Sasuke's pulling became more effective. He got me off for a second, a line of blood and saliva between us, and I glimpsed the mess of cuts and slits that I had made of his lips, but I moved back in and sucked on until he finally pinned me down. Calm down, Naruto. Sasuke brushed my face with his free hand. He had me clamped down between his legs and I watched him through glazed eyes sit up and wipe the blood off his mouth with the back of his hand. The nasty bruises were healing immediately, but the blood had stained the white collar of his shirt and speckled his flawless skin. It alarmed me that I had done that to him, but at the same time the sight fanned a deep desire for more of him at the same time. I reached out for Sasuke, but he just looked down at me, appearing surprisingly calm after being attacked like that. But the concern was in his voice. Naruto. I growled in response. It just came out, a desperate sound born in my chest but emitted from my throat, and Sasuke bent down over me, took hold of my two hands and pinned them down beside my head. The want for him was panicked and excruciating. I screamed from both the pain and frustration and fought against him futilely. Through tear-filled eyes I watched his dark eyes fill with those tangles of red, and Sasuke's callous desire clenched the room. It overflowed and receded, then again burst through like it always did in that shoreline dance for control that he is always at the brink of. With one last painfully indefinable look at me, he came down on my throat with his teeth, and I moaned when those hot blades entered me, sliding through my skin and instantly making me hard. My body coiled and my heartbeat quickened as if to joyfully deliver as much blood for Sasuke as possible. My limbs lost all of their power and I floated away in a new and welcomed chant of Sasuke's voice telling to sleep. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.